cr101radio.com, podcasts, and more. Welcome back to another episode of Preschool Pioneers. I'm your host, Jeremy Walker. You can follow us on our parent network, CR101 Radio, on social media such as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And you can subscribe to this podcast on your preferred platform so you never miss an episode. Visit cr101radio.com for these links. And thank you again for joining me for Preschool Pioneers. We are going to start this episode, which is entitled, E is for Education. Why you have been fooled into thinking that education has anything to do with learning facts. This podcast is all dedicated to talking about Christian parents and Christian teachers, and in particular, why Christians are so important and why Christians should become teachers. In fact, this podcast isn't just called Preschool Pioneers, and it's not just for Christian parents and teachers, but it's also entitled Evangelism and Financial Independence Through Christian Education. Now, the reason for that is because Christians can learn to become financially independent and still be full-time missionaries as well. I know the common misconception, it's been a common thing when I was growing up in the church as well, is that if somebody was going to be a full-time missionary, it was going to have to be in some foreign far land, far away from the United States. But if you haven't noticed, the United States is full of people who are in need of evangelism. And in fact, there's a whole brand new crop of children out there, they're born every single year, that are in need of evangelism as well. So you don't have to leave your own back door in order to be a missionary here in the world to make a difference for Christ. On top of that, through the usage of Christian schools and Christian education, a Christian family through a family-run Christian school can also learn to be financially independent, not like normal missionaries depending on churches and handouts and other people, having to compromise themselves and, of course, not only their security, but also the level of financial care that they give to their family. But they can, far from just trying to meet their family needs, they can secure their family's future. And so we also have here in Southwest Florida, I'm part of the Grace Community Schools. We have 6 locations, and we are building our 7th shortly here in Southwest Florida. And of course, we are looking for people who also have a heart for Christian education. We have an apprenticeship program, so we try to train or want to train the next generation of Christian teachers. If that's of any interest to you, if you want the idea of learning how to become a Christian teacher, a full-time missionary, how to gain financial independence, and of course, teach children for the kingdom of God, go to our website at cr101radio.com and find the link that says apprenticeship. I want to go ahead and continue then, besides just giving the basis for what we do and why we do it, and I want to start with something that most people don't understand. I'm also a preacher, and we'd like to do studies based on different subjects, and R.J. Rushdoony is a world-renowned theologian and the father of the homeschool movement here in the United States of America. If you're not familiar with him, you can go to chalcedon.edu and look him up, and you can find out more information and facts. And of course, all of his books are there too. Now, we also partner with him, CR101 Radio, and we have produced materials for Chalcedon, audiobooks, remastering lectures, and so you can find a lot of those materials on our website, and they're absolutely free to listen to. Just go to cr101radio.com, and you can find all of Rushdoony's stuff there, audiobooks, lecture series, many things to help ground you in your faith if you haven't looked at it yet. Now, one of the studies we're doing right now at our church is we're going over R.J. Rushdoony's book, The Messianic Character of American Education. Now, I've been reading Rushdoony's books and a fan of them for a long time now, but this is one book I've never picked up and never read. I'm not sure why, because I'm a career educator. I should have at some point picked it up. It was one of his first books to kind of really put him on more of a national and global scale as a scholar, as an educator, and somebody to point out the difference between education. Education is not just a neutral term where we're learning about facts. Now, most people want to fool everyone. Everyone. Convince them that education is about learning, reading, writing, arithmetic, and it's all about that. Just educational based, it's intellect based, it's fact based stuff. In fact, one of the coined phrases that they used for years was fact based. And of course, that was in competition with the concept of faith based. So, as opposed to those religious facilities and schools over there, these more common or public or government institutions that are educational facilities, they're not partial. They're not biased. When you come to us, you're just going to get a general education, a liberal education, as they want to call it. And this is just for the general conversation of facts around the world. Now, once again, you've been sold a bill of goods. Most churches in the United States of America, because I grew up in them, they did not see a problem with sending their children to what we call public schools, or I like the better term, government schools. And the reason for that is there is a bent in the educational goals of the school. Now, take the Christian school as an example. What is the original goal of the Christian school? The Christian school is to teach children, to educate them, but mostly to give them a moral framework with which to work with, and how to see the world, how to become blessed, how to take all the facts that we're teaching you, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, and how to put that to a godly use to build the kingdom of God and to be rewarded now and in eternity. Now, what is it that the government schools are doing? They're also instilling a framework as well, a religious framework, how to see the world. And then they're going to take all those facts that they give them, and they're pointing them in a certain direction, kind of like our most previous podcast was Destination, and they want to produce a child, a certain type of individual. And they're not trying to teach children to obey God. They're trying to teach them to disobey God, meaning we're going to make up our own rules and laws back to the original sin in the garden. And then, of course, their job is to make them a good citizen of the humanistic state, to worship the state. We want children to worship God. They want children to worship the state, or rather, mankind, generally speaking, as against God. Because there is no neutrality in education, but so many people, so many Christians have been fooled by this idea and still are. Now, how about we do this? How about we say, let's take the children out of the environment. Let's take them out of the environment and let's put them into Christian schools, or not Christian schools, but in homeschools instead. Now, once again, I mentioned Rushdoony was the champion of freedom for homeschooling here in the United States. He traveled around the country. He became an expert witness for people to the chagrin of all the humanistic lawyers out there. And because of his efforts, America turned away from the oppression of Christian education and homeschool education as well, and opened up the door for those freedoms that we now have but did not have back then. Now, the book, Messianic Character of American Education, was fundamental in that, because it laid the framework to kind of go, here's where we started. And he starts with Horace Mann and all the main educators that are out there. There's a lot of them. But Horace Mann was considered the father of the common school, or the public school, the government school. And he claimed to be a Christian, of course, and his goals, however, were not Christian. And so many of the guys that are in the book, the main people who influenced everything, there's a lot of them. And whenever you start to read about them, and from Rushdoony gives you a history lesson about what they did and what was the outcome, the fruit of what they did, and they were bringing humanism to America. That's what they were doing. They were de-Christianizing the United States of America through education. And their work and stuff, when you read it, their actual works that they did, that I said, what they wrote about, they viewed themselves as having a religious goal, or religious crusade, if you will, to save the world. And the vehicle to do that was not the gospel, though. The vehicle to do that was going to be education, government, public education. And so they were going to roll in salvation for mankind through education. At least that was what they sold it as. What really happened is they came in to a mostly Christianized United States of America, and they then were going to control the education of all the children. And they literally saw these schools as the temples or worship centers of the America of humanism. And they saw the teachers as the new priest. They were going to be the ones to dispense to the children and then to the general population morals, ethics, and morality. Now, this moral ethics and morality did not come from God, and this was not what they were going to teach. But that's not how it started. How it started was these guys like Horace Mann and the rest, they claimed to be staunch Christians. They called themselves that as well. The funny thing is that you don't look at what a person says, you look at what they're producing. This is why we say, by their fruits you shall know them. Because people can make fair speeches and convince you of anything with their words, but their actions show and say a different thing. And so in the educational field, they lied and said it's all about learning facts. And they tried to say, well, you can still maintain your religious beliefs. We're going to stay neutral over here. And no matter what you see or hear, we're not taking sides. We're just educators. We're just neutral people. And what happened to the American education system, they got real smart, at least for a humanist smart. They got real smart and they said, well, we can't outrightly just take over and force people from the start to come to government education's indoctrination centers, what they come down to. So what they had to do is convince people to kind of willingly be taxed or tax themselves, like property taxes. And this was going to produce the money for the common or the government schools. Because, of course, don't you want to help everybody? Don't you want to be a philanthropist? Don't you want to help your better man? Wouldn't God want this? What would Jesus do? Wouldn't Jesus want us to help the poor and the needy? Wouldn't Jesus want us to raise up the ignorant and give them an education? After all, we're not going to do anything that's not already in line with what you're doing. We're just educating these poor people. We're going to bring everybody deserves a good, fresh head start, if you call it that. And so they sold it as a bill of goods where Christianity was already the nation's framework. Everybody would call themselves Christian, generally speaking. And these guys did too. But what happened was these guys came in, sold this as a bill of goods to the general population, forced taxation. And we're going to steal money from people, and we're going to use that money to teach the entire population, the general society and public, a brand new set of morals. Now, once again, they didn't start out like that, just outright humanistic to the core. What we're seeing today took a very long time to get here, a very long time, over 100 years to get where we're at today, where the public education system, the government education system, is a complete sewer of filth, an open filth, to where we're having people going to school boards, and they're talking about the pornographic books that they're giving them to teach children how to do all kind of sexually perverted things, and on doing it on purpose. But guess what? They keep sending their children there. What they don't understand is that whenever they took money and the state came in and took the tax dollars, and then they took the tax dollars and they gave it to the government and said, you're now going to provide the education. They then hire the teachers. The teachers don't work for the parent anymore. The teachers work for the state. They set up what they used to call the schools for teachers. We call them accreditation, certification training is what we would call it today. But they were going to control the training of the teachers, what they taught and how they taught it. And so they didn't have to outrightly just take all the children, shove them on little buses, and deliberately force them out of the homes or your truancy, and we're going to put you in jail if you don't give us your children willingly. All they had to do was lie. They had to come in and lie. And through guile and deception, they were able then to create what we call the public or government schools today. And of course, we see the fruit of it. It's been horrendous. So horrendous now that they can't even define what a woman is. They're advocating for chopping off children's genitalia, mutilating people. And it was the public schools, the government schools recently, who were absolutely advocating for that. In fact, they would help children keep it secret from their parents. This is, by definition, demonic. And it started out as if they were lied about their intentions. When you read their work, they would not say that they're evil. They would not say that they're trying to harm the child. They would not say they're trying to sway a country away from God and God's commandments. They would not say that they were doing evil things. They believed in their good intentions. They believed that they were on the side of the angels. They really did. But they weren't. And that's the kind of the point. As us as educators and us as parents, we have to be careful about this subject as well. Because people can, if they're not openly self-consciously evil, they could have good intentions and still do bad and evil things. So we can't just look at what our intentions are, but what are we doing? What actions are we taking? Which directions, the destination, where are we headed with all this? What's this going to produce? And is that product the direction we're supposed to go and the product that we're supposed to produce? Well, in America today, by the end of the road, because they did what they did, we found out that all the intentions, no matter what they thought their intentions were, they de-Christianized the United States of America to the point where we're at today, to where we're still Christian. That's why they're having to do the mass immigration, stuff like that. They still can't fully pull it out because there's still people that are still influenced by it, who are older, who still remember education, still had some Christian influence in it. If we don't turn things around, it's going to get much worse. But we have to understand we cannot be fooled any longer. As parents and as teachers, we have to understand everyone has a religious motivation. Everyone has a religious goal. And we have to as well. It has to be what drives you. And you can't be fooled any longer, thinking that there are not battle lines drawn, thinking that education is somehow neutral, and it's about learning facts. Once again, when people pulled out their children and got them into their homeschools, it also then got perverted as well. You have other educators that are out there, or at least people that have educational ideologies, like the unschooling thing. Unschooling was a big thing as well. They pulled them out of the public school because we don't want to force the children to do anything they don't want to do. We don't want to teach them to read if they don't want to read. We don't want to teach them math. They don't want to do math. In fact, children should do things that occupy their creative desires. So if they want to spend all day outside playing in a treehouse, that's what we should let them do. And this is the best way to educate the child, to go with their interest areas, never forcing anything upon the child. What do you get? Humanism 101. Not teaching anything about Christianity, not teaching even an education at this point, and therefore it's not even by definition education at all. And yet it's still religiously motivated, because the religious motivation says there are no authority structures, and therefore you have a demonic version of education, which we call homeschooling or unschooling. There are people who go into homeschooling, and yet they don't teach discipline. They never teach a work ethic. They never make the children get up on any type of routine. In fact, routines were seen as evil. Giving children tasks was seen as evil by many people. And so once again, you have all these flavors of humanism with good intentions. People always claim that they have these good intentions to do X, Y, or Z. But the problem is that they're not producing anything worth anything. Right now, like my children are getting older, and they're starting to look for spouses now, and that's a good thing. Obviously, they've been raised in Christian schools, good Christian character, saves their money, good morals, of course, as well. And, of course, they even have vocations, like working at these schools here in Southwest Florida that we have. And a lot of them now are already in management positions and already have careers ahead of them, just no spouses yet. And so they're in these what we call dating pools where Christians are at. And the problem is that the females in there, these are from Christian families, they don't want to get married. They don't want to be tied down. They haven't really learned authority for the most part in their families for the most part. And they, on top of that, they don't want to work. They don't want to do anything. They get this mentality that they're supposed to just sit at home and be the happy homemaker who doesn't participate in the field of money or business or anything. The only thing she's supposed to do is wake up when she wants to, let the children wake up when they want to, give them no discipline of any sorts. Doesn't produce any structure for the home. And therefore, the husband has to go out and he ends up working with other people, but he's not going to work with his wife because she's not supposed to work. And all of a sudden, we find out and are shocked that the husbands out there who have businesses, and maybe they have secretaries or they have females who are working with them in the workplace, they end up sleeping around and having affairs and getting divorced because they're now having affairs with people that they work with. In fact, one of the major ways that people find other people and have these kind of affairs and whatnot is due to the fact that it's usually somebody that they're working with. Because the important thing about Christian marriage is that it is a combined effort. The husband and wife are the same person. She's his helpmate. Now, Christians have perverted that idea. They've now split the man and the woman, said these are your duties and these are his duties, and these two don't ever intersect. And because of this, because the work aspect of it is split, You now have men who are looking for somebody who is helping them in their vocation, because their vocation is everything. I watched a show recently. It was a TV program. And the guy was a football coach, and he was in college football. He's got to travel around a lot. He's got to keep the players happy. He's got to win. He's got to commit himself to this career if he's going to be good at it and provide for them and the family. Well, of course, the new wife that he has, he'd already been divorced once. He remarries, and now she, of course, is having affairs on him as well, because why? You are married to your job. You're married to your job. You're not married to me. You're married to your job. And so she goes around and fornicates because you're so committed, and you're cheating on me with your work, so I'm going to cheat on you with the guy over here who's teaching me Pilates or whatever. And the problem comes down to is that what I'm trying to explain is the idea that there are so many wrong answers, so many wrong ways to do it, and there's only one right way to do it. But there's a lot of flavors of humanism with good intentions that are out there, that people that have split the duties with the homemaking wife in this idea are well-intentioned. But it does not produce homes that are happy. It does not produce families that are stable. It does not produce children who are growing up and able to take dominion, to take over, to run businesses, to be responsible. They can't even get married. I mean, these young folk, they are chronically single. None of them want to get married. The women don't want to have their, especially when they reach 18, they don't want their freedoms now to be limited now by anything, to go into marriage, have children. They not necessarily are nefarious about wanting to go around and commit fornication with people, not necessarily that, but they don't want the idea of responsibility. They don't want the idea of duties and whatnot. And especially in the homeschool movement, this is a big part of that. A lot of the times as well, especially for the men, these young guys have never been taught responsibility, have never been taught duties, and they're not ready for a family. They have not remotely learned how to save money. They've not learned how to get a work ethic. They have not learned anything about the responsibilities of being a husband and a father. And most of them, if we're telling the truth, most of these young boys are addicted to porn. So they have no desire even to jump and go get married and to take on a family, take on a wife, and take on the responsibilities. They are not dominion men. They're not even men. They're boys who never grew up. They're worthless to the world. And so are ladies. These ladies don't want children. They don't want to have babies. They don't want to reproduce. They don't want a husband to listen to. They don't, if they do get married, they sure as heck don't want to work with him. In fact, I've heard that whenever you're talking to them, some of the young men I've heard from, they're talking to these ladies about, hey, I have a career. I want you to work with me. I want to do a family-run business type model where we're working together, controlling our families, financially stable, controlling our children's education. We're always together. We're not separate most of the day, because that's what the homeschool movement does for the most part. If you're doing this Susie homemaker idea that they have out there that they somehow claim is biblical, but it's not remotely even defensible. But the idea is that when they propose the idea of working side by side with your husband, they reject the idea, and then all talks are over. Same with the females. A big one for these men, and I question their manhood, to be honest with you. What young man does not want to find a good, godly woman and start his own family and become a dominion man, a man of power and strength for the kingdom of God? They don't want it. They just don't want it. And what they want is all the benefits of marriage. Let's say that. Let's say benefits of marriage with all the duties and responsibilities that come with it. And most of them don't even want that. As I mentioned before, these are not men. And a big interesting aspect that I've heard about them is that a lot of these guys have nothing to offer. Nothing to offer. They are not bringing a career. They're not bringing money. They're not even necessarily bringing a work ethic, necessarily speaking. But they're not bringing anything to the table for the young females that are out there. And then, of course, if they say, well, I have a career, I'm stationed here, like my daughters have, they have a career, and my wife did this to me, actually. I was looking when I was 18 years old, looking for a career in Christian education, and my wife already had schools with her father and whatnot. And I, of course, I think I mentioned this in the recent podcast episode. I actually came down here to learn how to run Christian schools, and therefore it was my vocation. So when I met her, she's just like, okay, well, I know your plans were to go back to your hometown and start Christian schools there, but you don't have any money, you have no capital, You barely don't even really have an education about how to do this. It's like my first year or so doing this. And she goes, however, I have all this over here. And so I think you're a good concept of marriage, a good prospective spouse. But here are my terms, and I want you to work side by side with me in the vocation God has given me, establish with me, and you're already looking for a career. So what do you think about that? I said, absolutely. Didn't hesitate for a second. You have a woman sitting in front of you who has everything, and God has placed you in her path. And these men are walking away from these types of issues and situations because they don't want to move. They like working at Walmart. They got no future. They have no home. They don't even own their car. Most of them are in debt. They don't have anything necessary to offer, and they can't see that God going, hey, I'm going to put something in your way that's truly amazing. So if you notice what I'm saying here is that education is not about the 3 R's at all. It's really about your character, your Christian character, and what you produce and what you build. And it does not matter if you do have an intelligent child. And this is kind of where the foolery came in. The homeschool movement and Christian school movement got the idea they were kind of inferior to public or government schools because they were told they weren't really educators. They got and bought the lie that they could be told that they weren't, therefore they felt inferior. It's like somebody's bullying you, telling you you're worthless, and you're buying into it to try to prove that you're not. It's like Marty McFly always being called yellow, and he had to, do something stupid to prove his manhood. Christian educators, Christian parents, we have nothing to prove to the humanists out there. Whenever they were rebuilding the temple, and they came over there to bother them, to try to say, hey, they say all kinds of lies to try to get them to stop. And Nehemiah just goes, hey, I'm working here. I'm too busy to bother with you fools. I'm not coming to bother with talking to you. And that's the way Christians should be. We shouldn't be listening to the world. We should be building the kingdom of God in our homes and in ourselves and trying to help other people do that as well. So in other words, Christian parents should never have felt that they weren't good enough for their children, or the Christian school was not a true educational facility because they were being told that they weren't. And therefore, what did they focus on? Well, look at our grade scores. We're so much smarter. We can do math better. We can write better. We can do this better. We can do that better. It was never about that. The humanists out there would never give you the respect that you're so looking for because you think it's about academics when for them, it's about religious loyalties. You will never measure up because you're not teaching your children to be humanist. However, in a lot of ways, like the things I've mentioned, they did. It just wasn't that they were loyal to the state first, so you weren't the right flavor of ice cream for them. But we're not trying to make our children smart. We're not trying to get a degree up on the wall. We're not trying to make sure that our children have learned more facts than the other child. They can count faster than the other child. They know more about history. They can sit down and number all the states in the United States of America and their capitals and put them in alphabetical order, and they can also do a puzzle map in 5 seconds. These things are not what education is about. These are topics. These are subject matters. And for me, education, what you need is whatever you need in order to thrive in this world. Now, if you want to learn more and go beyond that, go right ahead. Some people are academics. Some people just are book readers. Rushdoony is a great example of that. This guy had a massive library. He read multiple books a day. He was an academic. Nothing was ever going to stop him from being an academic. He did not have to have somebody push that upon him. It's who he was. And most of the time, this is how we look at schools. We think we can take education and wrap children into a box. If we put them in a box, we can then kind of create an educated child. That's not what we want. We want to produce a godly child. They want to produce, the government schools, they want to produce a humanistic child. We want children that will grow up and be able to form families and be able to bring about and serve the kingdom of God in this world. The government schools, want to do the opposite. In fact, they don't even want them to have families, because if they had a family, that would mean that they were somehow loyal to Christianity. In fact, to be a true hero of the humanistic government school, you must be some form of sexual pervert. And you have to be either that or an ally, as they call it, to the sexual pervert. And they despise the family. They despise authority. They're demonic. That is what the government schools are trying to produce. They're not trying to produce the family, trying to destroy the family, because the family belongs to God. You can't understand the world. You can't understand politics unless you understand this simple perspective. And it's not about reading, writing, and arithmetic, because there are some super smart, evil people out there. And a lot of them we call politicians. Because if you take, of course, an unintelligent criminal, what are they going to do? They're going to rob the gas station. They're going to rob the ATM. What do we do to the highly educated thief? What does he look like? He comes in through savvy and governmental force, and he steals your tax dollars. He's going to send your money off to Ukraine. He's going to funnel it back to himself. They're going to do fraud, like we saw in Minnesota, where they were taking tax dollars or claiming to be running schools, and they weren't. And they were stealing tax dollars. This is how people respond when they're intelligent. They learn how to steal without people knowing that they did it, or without people being able to realize what they did. That's the only difference between a highly educated, immoral person and one without one. Now, for Christians, I want to kind of give us a final perspective here and wrap up. And the final perspective is, what kind of education are you supposed to be giving your child? You're a homeschooler. Great. You're a Christian education. You have a facility, a school, you're a teacher, a Christian teacher. Great. You own a facility, you own a school like a Christian daycare or a Christian upper grade school. Great. But what is our goal? Where is our curriculum? You want to call it that. The end goal to it. And it's not talking about reading, writing, arithmetic. These are things that we utilize in order to be the kind of people we are. Education, as far as academics is concerned, is only to be successful in our endeavors. So the humanistic people would use education, reading, writing, arithmetic, science, only to do evil. And we would use these things as tools to do good. So the only difference really is, where's the framework? Where does it come from? What is the true direction of education from the Bible? And I want to sum up this entire episode of E is for Education. I'm hoping that I'm making you think about this. And I'm hoping that you can understand you want to create a godly child with godly morals, wanting to become a dominion man or a dominion woman, be able to go out there, be responsible, ready for the duties and responsibilities of it. If you haven't done that as a parent, or if you haven't done that as a teacher, then you failed. I don't care if they can read. I don't care if they can recite. If they are not moral people ready to take on adult responsible duties, you failed. So let's go ahead and wrap up this episode with Proverbs 4, 1 through 19. This, I believe, gives us a really good understanding of what does it mean to get a Christian education. And please notice that the opposite of this, everything I'm saying here, is going to be what the humanists want, the complete opposite. So let's quote Proverbs 4, 1 through 19. Quote, "Hear ye, children, the instruction of a father, and attend unto understanding. For I give you good doctrine, forsake ye not my law. For I was my father's son, tender and only loved and beloved in the sight of my mother. He taught me also, and said unto me, Let thine heart retain my words, keep my commandments and live. Get wisdom, get understanding, forget it not, neither decline from the words of my mouth. Forsake her not, and she shall preserve thee. Love her, and she shall keep thee. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. Exalt her, and she shall promote thee. She shall bring thee to honor, when thou dost embrace her. She shall give to thine head an ornament of grace, a crown of glory shall she deliver to thee. Hear, O my son, and receive my sayings, and the years of thy life shall be many. I have taught thee in the way of wisdom. I have led thee in right paths. When thou goest, thy steps shall not be straitened, and when thou runnest, thou shalt not stumble. Take fast hold of instruction. Let her not go. Keep her, for she is thy life. Enter not into the path of the wicked, and go not into the way of evil men. Avoid it. Pass not by it. Turn from it and pass away. For they sleep not, except they have done mischief, and their sleep is taken away, unless they cause some to fall. For they eat the bread of wickedness, and drink the wine of violence. But the path of the just is as the shining light, that shineth more and more into the perfect day. The way of the wicked is as darkness. They know not at what they stumble." Unquote. Now, if you know anything about Proverbs, What it's talking about is a moral education, moral understanding. Wisdom is literally the keeping of God's commandments, and they're not grievous. 99% of your focus should be 100% focused on the morals of your child and your student. The other 1%, now we're going to focus on the academic side. Because it does not matter what kind of academic education you give your child. If they are in the way of evil men, it will not serve them well. Everything that they do will just be evil. I want you as an educator to do everything self-consciously. If you're an educator at home and you're a parent, maybe you have homeschooling students. You need to focus on the moral application of the teaching of your child every day in all things that you do. Your curriculum is their life. It's not in their books. Curriculum is only a systematic way of teaching and instructing. So part of your curriculum is getting up, out of bed on time. Part of your curriculum is making your bed, folding your clothes, washing your clothes, doing the dishes, cleaning the house, whatever it might be. If they have jobs, they shouldn't get an allowance. If they have jobs, they should be learning how to be diligent in them. Kind of like me with a family-run Christian school. Not only do we do the academics, but the vast majority, because my children are always around me, they're not just with mommy all day. They're also with daddy as well, especially when they're young. And as they get older, they learn to be more independent and more independent and more independent, because children, by the time they reach adulthood, should not be dependent upon their parents. They should be independent and ready to take on the tasks of an adult. Our jobs are not to retard the education and the maturity of our children. Our jobs are to be ready to make them into dominion men and women, capable of standing against evil men, being the arrows who are going to go forth and combat the enemies in the world. And it's not a physical war we're in. We are in a very much so spiritual war. And it's time that we need to wake up. Well, thank you again for joining me on Preschool Pioneers. This is Jeremy Walker. This has been E is for Education. And I hope I've given you something to think about. And I hope you come back and join me for our next episode as well. Until then, God bless.